Well, Kieran, I've never seen such a turnaround by a government in what they believe in. So in the first 6 years, we know they were elected in 2013, they were about budget repair and they were about pretty high levels of immigration, skilled migration, a focus on that to keep the budget going, and they're about lower taxes, which in fairness they're still about. Stage 3 tax cuts that have come, and there's all these other business incentives and the like. But now, even there in that question time, you can hear that, and in this answer from Josh Frydenberg, they're about spending whatever it takes, and they are about, as the Prime Minister says, fighting the virus, not the Labor Party, which means keeping international borders shut until it is safe to open them, which could be out into the never, never, no matter what the budget papers say. So my question to Josh Frydenberg was, what is the difference between a Liberal and a Labor government? Press Club last year, I'm sure you remember, you spoke about supply-side reform and Thatcher and Reagan type policies. You told the Coalition Party Room in June last year the next election would be about limitless providers versus enablers. I'm going to borrow the vernacular of a former Treasurer and say what is in the budget for the true believers, the true Liberal believers, the ones who believe in a reforming Conservative government who are better than the other mob at budget repair. What is the difference between a Liberal and a Labor government at the moment?
Well, this is a Liberal budget. And at the heart of this budget is the concept of backing the private sector. I said it in my speech last night. 8 out of every 10 jobs in Australia are in the private sector. And we want the private sector to feel confident to invest, to hire and to grow. That's what the business investment incentives are about. That's what the loss carryback measures are about. That's what measures like regulatory change around the AAT and the ATO are all about. At times of national crises, there are no ideological constraints. And if I walk into the wilderness one day and know that I've done my small bit to help a generation of Australians avoid long-term unemployment, what the economists call the scarring of the labour market, I will be proud of that.
And he was quoting John Howard there, who told him just before he set up JobKeeper, at a time of economic crisis, there are no ideological constraints. However, Howard's long-term treasurer, Peter Costello, was saying otherwise at that time. He was quoted last year as saying debt is a concern and you need to keep an eye on that. The other distinction I want to make here is this. When that occurred, there was lockdowns predicted for as long as 6 months. There were certainly long lockdowns which went nearly 2 months on the way. We're not in those same conditions now. So it could have been an opportunity to rein in spending a bit, but we know there's an election on the horizon. Anyway, it was a pretty interesting answer that he saw that as his biggest achievement.
And I spoke to the Prime Minister, Andrew, as you know, earlier, and put it to him this shift as well in the government's trajectory, really, in terms of its policies. And he was one of the treasurers who was part of that reining in the spending and trying to be as disciplined as possible, Andrew. Yeah, a real change in mindset from him. So Scott Morrison's argument to Kieran in their interview this morning, their face-to-face, was that he was glad that they worked so hard to do all that budget repair because when this crisis came along, they were then ready to have the fiscal capacity to deal with it. You were one of the key members. I remember very vividly as a treasurer and trying to repair the budget. How does it, you know, as you now at PM and delivering this budget, it's such a huge turnaround from those days talking about the need to rein things in, and now, as far as the eye can see, it's deficit.
Well, I'm glad we did what we did. I'm glad we got the budget back to balance before the pandemic hit. I'm glad we did all that work that put Australia in a position to be able to respond in the way that we have, which now means Australia is a position which is basically the envy of the world. Now, that is because of what Australians have done and how our budget support has enabled Australians to carry this country through. And we're going to keep doing that. We can't turn back from that. We can't go down alternative paths. We'll spend responsibly, but we have to spend to ensure that we keep this recovery on track.
Andrew, the other question that we've been discussing as well with the amount of expenditure, is this an election budget?
That's right. And putting it to the Prime Minister this morning, he's trying to say that politics don't factor in. OK. He's a politician. But look, he also told Channel 9 as well definitely next year, although did he say definitely? He said he couldn't predict political circumstances.
Because this pandemic is raging, and as Prime Minister,
I have to put... You look at this and you could run to an election on this. There are no cuts in this.
People who focus on politics will do that. But as Prime Minister, I have to focus on the pandemic. And Australians out there, that's what they're focused on. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about their health. They're worried about their family members who are struggling with mental health or struggling with putting their family into residential aged care. And what I have to do is give them confidence that there is a plan, and there is, because that plan is working. The election's next year, mate. Election's next year. I've said that. I can't control every circumstance in Australian politics. But what I can do is stay focused on the fight that matters, and that's the pandemic and securing health and livelihoods of Australians.